the interface between night and day. Still devoid of any detail, the landscape is mere shape and outline. The first rays of dawn cast their veil into the mountain valleys near León in northern Spain. This is Asturias, a remote region the Romans incorporated into their empire 2,000 years ago. In those days, its slate mountains were rich in gold. As if to oppugn the soft lines, the bizarre conical pillars of Las Médulas rise up against the backdrop of the mountains, like theatrical figures waiting for the light in order to make their appearance. Light, colour, shadows. A daily natural spectacle, accelerated in the time-lapse mode of our impatience. These sculptures of red clay and stone were not formed over many centuries by erosion. No ice-age glaciers cut gorges into the rock, carrying away clay and gravel. Nor were the unusual shapes in these mountains formed by the wind. Las Médulas is a work of art created by human hand. Whether given sharp or more rounded lines, to the inhabitants of the now deserted villages, the shapes of the mountains, which formed legends of their own accord, must have had a magical character. Faces seem hidden in the rock, petrified figures that came to life, like the princess who, it said, owned nothing but the field of rocks here. And because in those days children's wishes were still fulfilled, the mountains glowed every time the maiden looked at them. Yet perhaps she merely sat on the rim of the broad crater, dreaming open-eyed, while the day just seemed to fly by. Another new morning entices the flocks of swallows out of their red holes in the rock. Three children in search of a Roman past. Where did the many rocks come from? Who piled them up, and why? In school, they were taught that this is the waste from mining activities that took place 2,000 years ago. To get at the gold that lay deeper and deeper in the ground, the layers of rock and soil above had to be removed. Ruina montium, destruction of the mountains, was the technique with which the Romans obtained gold here in their Spanish province. They forced the mountain apart with hydraulic power. Clay, sand and stones were washed down into the valley by the masses of water. That is why there are so many piles of scree in the fields around Las Médulas. The gleaming red conical peaks and craggy blocks in the broad semicircle remained standing because the pressure of the water was not enough to shatter the mountain completely. A monument to the destructive force of man, literally a work of art. Today, the ruins of the mountains are under a preservation order. They're an accessible monument which nature has recaptured. Sweet chestnuts. Here, the fruit usually ripens on the branches of old trunks that are completely hollow. It's not yet time to harvest them. Marianne, Eduardo and Dani love roasted chestnuts. But the Romans the three are searching for traces of were interested in fruits that did not grow on trees. To get at the particles of gold, over a period of 150 years, 100 million cubic meters of earth were flushed out of this crater, which is around 3,000 meters wide. Their scarred flanks show that the gold-bearing mountains were not given their present shape by nature. They consist of a conglomerate of clay and red earth, in which stones of various sizes are embedded. Covered with holes and crevices, the steep walls have been taken over by swallows. Brittle yet stable, exposed to the sun and the rain for hundreds of years, the walls seem to have covered themselves with a horny skin. Towards midday, as the sun reaches its zenith, it casts a ray of light into the biggest cavern still in existence, La Encantada. The two boys are struggling to keep up with Marianne. The young Asturians, whose ancestors cut the galleries into the mountains 2,000 years ago in the service of imperial Rome, are out of breath. But they're spurred on by love of adventure. But is their scientific curiosity slightly tinged with the desire to show off? Perhaps Roman historian Pliny was exaggerating a little when he noted that what happens is far beyond the work of giants. The mountains are bored with corridors and galleries. For months, the miners cannot see the sunlight, and many of them die inside the tunnels. The work of giants, as he put it, completely transformed the landscape. Gigantic, too, was the preliminary work required to break open the mountains. To bring the necessary water to Las Médulas, a system of aqueducts more than 100 kilometers in total had to be constructed through the mountains. It was then collected in large reservoirs. Ruina Montium. Countless tunnels were driven deep into the mountains. Naturally, the Romans didn't do the work themselves, they used the Asturians. From a main corridor, inclined galleries branched off in all directions. The mountains were hollowed out as if a myriad of moles had burrowed through them. Then a sluice was opened and the masses of water plunged down into the shafts. Mixing with air, they impacted with such force that the mountain was torn apart. High-tech 2,000 years ago. but fortunately with minor mathematical errors. Had it not been for the discovery of blasting galleries that are still intact, the scientific inventiveness of antiquity would scarcely be as graphic. Even though we do not know how, when, or why the bizarre sculptures were formed, we succumb to the fascination of the shapes, which seem to set aside the bounds between nature and art. The beautiful reverse aspect of the Roman culture of destruction. On our expedition into the heyday of the Roman Empire, we vacillate a little between admiration and horror at the achievements which the desire to master the forces of nature and exploit mineral resources drove even ancient civilizations, not to mention the exploitation of human labor. Pliny also appears to have accorded the subjugated Asturians who drove the tunnels through the mountains a brief side glance, because he added that the cracks made in the entrails of the stone are so dangerous that it would be easier to find purpurine or pearls at the bottom of the sea than make scars in the rock. How dangerous we have made the earth. And yet, the destruction gave rise to a fantastic new creation. Over 120 years, 100 million cubic meters of rock and earth were blasted out of the mountain range and washed away. And it was done to obtain just 100 hundredweight of gold. Sometimes facts seem more improbable than legends. Reality and legend. One day, one moment of recollection, and just one single breath in the eternal flow of time.